Year after year, a great many school-aged children are methodically lied to regarding significant aspects of history, especially events that occurred throughout U.S. borders. This approach to history and social studies plays a large part in preventing future generations of children from embracing a more progressive way to view the world we live in. Children are routinely taught to celebrate selective and false aspects of the lives of murderers, land thieves, and enslavers, from Christopher Columbus to Andrew Jackson to George Washington, just to name a few. The likes of these men are prominently adorned on currency, have schools named after them, and even have national holidays in their honor. Unsuspecting youth are taught to honor these types of individuals on an almost daily basis within their schools and throughout the larger society. This all happens while people whose lives and acts should be celebrated are routinely marginalized or are rewritten to appease the sensibilities of the dominant hegemony. If we collectively envision a brighter future, one that is riddled with peace, justice, and equity, then we must start by setting better examples for the youth. We should encourage them to celebrate the lives and actions of people who are motivated to improve humanity and not to exploit it. Teach the children to celebrate social justice champions and not those who are deniers of justice and freedom. This ongoing series of vignettes is geared at shedding some much needed light on significant aspects of historical figures and events. We must reclaim history from the revisionists. We must work to build a better global society, one significant aspect at a time. Many Americans are reminded of George Washington each time they use a quarter, a dollar bill, or simply when they think of the nation's capital. Fact of the matter is, many schools, geographic areas, and even a state are named after the United States' so-called first president. The President's Day holiday was initially created to honor the life of George Washington. Knowing what we now know about George Washington, Halloween would be a much more fitting day to honor people like him. Like many deplorable things, school children are systematically indoctrinated with vastly limited or even mythological tales about George Washington. This is all done to canonize the so-called father of a nation that was built on stolen land from indigenous people and on the backs of enslaved Africans. George Washington was no friend to Native Americans or African people. He was a most hypocritical and very bad man. Those who steal land and enslave others simply cannot be deemed good or benevolent, at least not within a humane society.
To chastise and intimidate the hostile nations, to cut off their next year's crops, and do them every other mischief which time and circumstance will permit. The country must not be merely overrun, but destroyed. You will listen to no overture of peace before the total ruin of their settlements is effected.
August 26, 1779. More than 5,000 men and officers under the command of New Hampshire General John Sullivan set out from Tioga, Pennsylvania. There is virtually no resistance to Sullivan's campaign. The American soldiers are astounded by the beauty and bounty of the Seneca homeland.
When they arrive in the Seneca country, they find these beautiful homes. They find the finest cornfields. They find the finest orchards of peaches and apples. And what they do is they set fire to everything, anything that can sustain life. They burn it. They kill whomever they find in their path, and they burn the houses to the ground. They cut the corn down. They set fire to all of the corn. They destroy anything that is edible.
what Sullivan was doing and was ordered by Washington was to scorch the earth. And its essence, it's saying to, the message being sent to the Haudenosaunee is, we plan to wipe out your families. We will starve you to death.
Mary Jamison, the adopted white sister of the Senecas, watches in horror.
A part of our corn they burnt and threw the remainder into the river. They burnt our houses, killed what cattle and horses they could find, destroyed our fruit trees, and left nothing but the bare soil and timber.
And this is where, to me, must have been the lowest period in our history, where we were reduced to starvation. To think of these proud people who had 100-acre, 200-acre cornfields and 1,500 fruit trees were now, in just the space of a month or two of Sullivan, were destitute.
From the diary of General Sullivan.
The number of towns destroyed by this army amounted to 40, besides scattering houses. The quantity of corn destroyed at a modest computation must amount to 160,000 bushels, with a vast quantity of vegetables of every kind. I flatter myself that the orders of which I was entrusted are fully executed.
The disingenuous history revisionist will tell you lies about George Washington not being able to tell a lie or that he chopped down a cherry tree. However, they will stray far from telling you that he was a proud slave owner. George Washington was a proud owner of more than 300 enslaved Africans. This fact alone makes George Washington a very bad man. As a matter of fact, George Washington at one time had his dentist remove 9 teeth from several of his slaves so that they could be placed into his wretched mouth. George Washington was only a hero for the masses of white colonizers who had no qualms with the enslaving of Africans or the theft of Native American land. The thought that countless children of color are programmed year after year to believe that George Washington was one of their so-called founding fathers is a most reprehensible thing. If these same children were alive during the time of George Washington's rule, they themselves might have been held captive on his plantation as slaves till their dying days. Abraham Lincoln is another character whose full history is seldom recognized, often described as some kind of great liberator or so-called emancipator of black people. In all actuality, Abraham Lincoln was a proud white supremacist. Had it not been for the likes of Frederick Douglass pressuring and agitating Lincoln's policies, the freeing of enslaved Africans might not have occurred when it did. Frederick Douglass spent much of his life as an abolitionist. Lincoln was a political opportunist and white supremacist. When it comes to the wretched institution of chattel slavery, the likes of Frederick Douglass should be celebrated, and not that of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was no more committed to ending slavery than most white people of his time. In 1862, he wrote to New York Tribune editor Horace Greeley, stating, "My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and it is not either to save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps the Union."
We do not need propaganda and romanticizing concerning our history. We need to teach the truth about our history. We need to teach the truth about Abraham Lincoln. We just celebrated the 150th year of the Emancipation Proclamation. But somewhere in that narrative, we do not tell the truth about Abraham Lincoln. Please read Lerone Bennett's Forced into Glory. It's a must if we're going to tell the truth about Abraham Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation. Abraham Lincoln wanted the gradual manumission of the Africans enslaved in this country. He wanted to reimburse the slaveholders for their loss in capital, and he wanted to emigrate, E-M-I-G-R-A-T-E, all blacks out of this country, either into Haiti or Liberia. Abraham Lincoln liked to tell darky jokes. He liked to hear darky jokes, and he used the N-word incessantly. Abraham Lincoln, as a matter of fact, historical fact, signed the Emancipation Proclamation on September the 22nd, 1862, to make null and void the Second Confiscation Act of the Congress that was to go in effect on September 23rd. The Second Confiscation Act of the Congress would have freed all enslaved Africans. Lincoln's proclamation only freed those Africans in the states that had already seceded from the nation, and those states which did not consider him their president anymore anyhow. We need to teach the truth about our Constitution. The constituting elements of the 1787 document approve of slavery and define Africans as 3/5 of a man. Sisters, you didn't count. A. Leon Higginbottom's book, In the Matter of Color, goes into great detail, colony by colony, to show us how the laws that existed in this country from the 1630s up to 1787 were not based on legal precedents, legal English, common English law, or jurisprudence. They were based on racism and custom. Now, after 150 years of racist law, you cannot help but have a racist constitution come into being in 1787. What does the 13th Amendment do? What does the 13th Amendment do? What does the 13th Amendment do? Is this a teacher's group I got here? What does the 13th Amendment do?
Supposedly abolish slavery, except as to incarceration.
Prisoners were never free. Prisoners in 2014 are still slaves in this country. 14th Amendment made prisoners still not citizens of this country. Prisoners are outside the citizenry of the United States. Please read Michelle Alexander's New Jim Crow. We need to teach the truth about our legal system. Emory Campbell's book, Unjust Law, is an excellent place to start. Principles above profit, principles above propaganda, and principles above being politically correct. That's a new, true revolution of values. We need to teach the truth about our politicians, from Bush to Barack. And please hear me clearly, it's not about the person. It is about the policies of this government. I'll teach you a new speech, Ashan. King said, I have a dream. Barack says, I have a drone.
All right.
We need to teach the truth about our politicians and the policies of this country. Every Tuesday morning, there's a kill list that the president decides who we're going to kill this week.
The false contention that Lincoln waged the Civil War to end slavery is refuted by his quick removal of General John Fremont for freeing Africans in Missouri in 1861, stating, "We didn't go into the war to put down slavery, but to put the flag back. For I never should have had votes enough to send me here if the people had supposed I should try to use my power to upset slavery." Abraham Lincoln also stated, quote, "Our Republican system was meant for a homogeneous people. As long as blacks continue to live with the whites, they constitute a threat to the national life. My family may also collapse, and the increase of mixed breed bastards may someday challenge the supremacy of the white man." Books like Forced Into by Lerone Bennett Jr. detail many of the suppressed realities of who Abraham Lincoln really was. It is imperative to teach children the facts regarding myriad historical figures and events. Exposing them to all of the facts is one of the greatest ways to teach youth. Instead of teaching them to celebrate the lives of white supremacists and enslavers, teach them the value of celebrating the lives of people like Frederick Douglass, John Brown, Ida B. Wells, Harriet Tubman, and so many others. There are a great many things we must collectively do to build a better society for the youth. Setting good examples for them is one of those ways. However, you simply can't set good examples for the youth by lying to them about history and telling them that white supremacists and enslavers were good people. Let's all do our part in helping to bring this history and the lessons within them to the light. A brighter future, quite frankly, depends on it.